2 seconds, I believe. It's taking a little bit of time.
It might be live already.
We may be live already. It says we're live now. All right, I'm gonna make sure to mute myself. And I'm gonna go back to our screen. All right. And good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, Black Business Focus Group and To the Table users. We're here this Friday afternoon with Christian Barnes of Do Better Financial. And Christian Barnes is here to participate in Voices of the Black Business Focus Group. And the topic for today is going to be making your Black dollars matter. And Christian is an expert in the area of budgeting, among other financial topics. But I want to bring Christian in today because budgeting to me is so very important. I've not always been a good budgeter. I've not always been a good manager of money, but it is something that I've continued to practice on. Also, when you take a look across the United States today, our community, the Black community, continues to struggle in the area of finances. And so I want to bring Christian in to help us learn, just from an introductory level about budgeting and some other financial topics. Welcome and good afternoon, Christian. How are you today?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me.
Good, good. Glad to have you. And I want you to start off. I got a couple of questions that I wrote down, but then we'll kind of move through this topic rather freely. I want you to start off, just tell us a little bit about who you are and give us some info about Do Better Financial.
Okay, I can do that. So as he said, my name is Christian Barnes. I am the founder and lead financial coach at Do Better Financial. I was about to say, and welcome to We Economy Wednesday. Wrong segment. So I have been doing primarily one-on-one financial coaching for the past 3 years. And I started my business because I actually went through a process of getting out of debt myself. You may have heard of Dave Ramsey. He has a program called Financial Peace. I went through the program, I got out of debt myself, and then I started teaching the class to others. And something that I noticed is that a lot of people were still struggling, even though they had the basics, they were still struggling on figuring out what actually worked for them and sticking to it. And so that was one of the things that kind of prompted me to start Do Better Financial. The other thing was that once I was out of debt, I could travel freely. I could kind of buy what I wanted. Now, granted, I just happen to be a relatively low maintenance person, so I didn't buy a lot, but that's just me. It wasn't like on purpose. But even I could buy what I wanted, but most of the people around me couldn't. And I realized it's not as much fun to have a bunch of money when everyone around you is broke. So I was like, okay, I need y'all to come with me so we can have fun together. So that was part of the reason that I started Do Better. And one of the reasons that I keep doing it is because I kind of took a little hiatus for about a year. I took a hiatus for about a year. And while I was in the process of getting married, that's a whole story. If you want to talk about wedding budgeting,
right?
Prepare yourself, gird your loins. But I took a little bit of a hiatus while I was going through that, our first year of marriage. And the pandemic brought me back because I could see it coming, that it was going to get rough for a lot of people. And I didn't realize at the time that was going to include me. My husband was furloughed. And so in the process of us getting ready to help others, God was like, oh, you think this is for other people? This is for you too. So that's kind of what brought me back. Yeah.
Well, it brings me to this next question, because we're all kind of in this situation together. And the economy, of course, is kind of going through some ups and downs and some swings. How should we be approaching this pandemic and all that's going on in the US right now when it comes to our finances? Should we hold on to everything we got, or can we keep living?
I think it's going to depend on a few different things, right? First of all, I think if you don't have any savings, you should hold on to everything you got till you got some. You need some savings, okay? Some people call it a safety net. Some people call it an emergency fund. That's what I refer to it as. I've heard of people say, GOK, God only knows. I've heard some other things that have some expletives in it. Call it what you want, have a stash, $1,000 minimum, preferably at least 3 months. I'm not gonna lie, I'm not there yet, but 3 months of expenses. My husband and I are still in the process of paying off some other debts. So, dealing with the IRS and anyway. So that process is, when you're talking about should you hold on to it or shouldn't you spend it all? And when I'm in what I call an emergency, the pandemic's an emergency, I tend to hold on to more than probably I usually would, right? But I'm also in the process of building a business. And so it's come down to a kind of a weighing, right? So we don't want to dip into the emergency fund for the business. We do have one. It probably has about $5,000 or $6,000 in it right now, which will get us through a couple of months if we just stop doing everything. And that's also assuming that we have zero income. That's not the case right now, right? If you're in a situation where your income has dropped to zero, definitely don't live life as usual. You ain't got no money. But you can also think about what is, and this is I actually walked through this in a video a few weeks ago, budgeting, or cash flow planning. People have this weird connotation with the word budget. They start feeling all, restricted and like they got on chains and like somebody won't let them have no fun. That's not what it's about. So I like to call it cash flow planning. So if I say CFP, that's what I'm talking about. It's not some other kind of weird 3-letter acronym. So cash flow planning, the idea is to enable yourself to know what you have, know what you owe, know what you need to take care of. And then if you have any money on top of that, of what you need to take care of, that's money that we can kind of play around with, right? So if you're in a situation where you still have disposable income, great. Make sure you take care of your regulars, have a little cushion, and then go on about your regular business. If you don't have a cushion, that's priority number one. That's what happens with the extra money. But I don't want everybody to live in complete fear. The world is not going to completely shut down. Houston might for a time. But you have to balance that wisdom of being prepared, but you also don't want to live in fear.
Right. Now, I'm glad you said that. I want to back up a little bit. Now, let's just assume that we're not in pandemic, we're not in any type of a major financial crisis across the United States. Everyone is gainfully employed.
Sure.
What are the steps that one should take, that families, that single people, what should we take in order to start the budgeting process?
Okay. So if you want to have a cash flow, a lot of people do this, right? It's actually not that uncommon. Most people have tried this at least once. Most people also quit. So I feel like most people get the idea of write down all of your bills and, add them up and know when they come out. A lot of people keep that kind of stuff in their head. I would like to propose, particularly if you are married, that's not a good place for it to be. It needs to be written down somewhere so y'all both know what's going on. But the biggest thing that I see is if somebody's trying to start cash flow planning, they start off with a wish list, right? I wish I didn't spend so much eating out. I wish I didn't smoke. I wish we didn't go out to brunch every week. Now, obviously, you may not be going out to brunch because brunch is over for the temporarily. I don't know how long this new order is going to last. I didn't hear how long Judge Hidalgo said this one was going to last, but we're back to red alert right now. But I wish I didn't do those things more. We can't just wish at it, right? We have to actually create some sort of plan. So if you're talking about taking something out of your normal expenses that you already spend, go through the process of figuring out what that look like. If I don't want to eat out as much, I have to cook more. I have to buy groceries. So trying to make that balance. The next thing you want to do is keep it simple. There are lots of apps. There are big, giant, I know that Philip and I are both spreadsheet people, so we love spreadsheets. I would not be surprised if both of us are very well familiar with pivot tables and VLOOKUPs. If you don't know what that is, you don't need to do a cash flow plan, okay? But I'm sure we have to resist the urge to stick them in there so that our spouses don't go, what is that? Right? So keep it simple, right? All you literally need is a pen, a piece of paper and a basic calculator. Honestly, you could do the math on paper, but if you just don't feel like it, you don't have to. That's what these are for, right? So keep it simple. The next thing you want to do is really go with the flow, right? Life is going to change. So when my husband was furloughed, we sat down and went, okay, what do we need to pay all of the bills? What can we shut off until unemployment starts?
Right.
That was what we had to do. So it's just a matter of, we had a budget for that month. I think it was April. But at that point, start over, because we have to. Normally, emergencies or little things that come up are not going to require you to scratch your budget or scratch your plan and just start over from scratch. But if it's something little, you forgot about somebody's birthday, you forgot about a wedding you're planning to go to, whatever, just go back, see where you can make adjustments, right, and then, put the thing in there and make adjustments elsewhere. The last thing that I like to tell people to do is give every single dollar a job, right? And that doesn't mean that you spend all of the money. It just means that they all have assignments. So for instance, some of your money will be assigned to sit still in your account. Right. Some of your money will be assigned to go pay bills. Some of your money will be assigned to go do other things, right? Some of your money, and this goes for businesses too, right? Some of your money will be assigned to stay in reserves to make sure you can pay if the roof got a leak and if you need to replace the air conditioner. Similar idea, right. But to know what all of that money is for, right? That's kind of the idea.
Right. Now, I'm you hitting on a lot of good points here. And I wrote down your list of things to do. Number one, write it down, come up with your wish list. But then you threw something in there that I think is really tough for a lot of people. And that is, you talked about analyze your behaviors and changing behaviors. A lot of people cannot change their behaviors. You said, okay, well, I got to give up the brunch. That means I got to start cooking. Dang it, Christian, now I got to start cooking. I'm going to mess up my budget.
Well, here's the thing. I don't think you have to make all those changes at once. I actually encourage people the first couple of months, unless you're in a dire situation, right? Let's assume, like you said, that this is not an emergency. This is just regular day. On a normal average day, you're able to cover your bills. You're just not able to make any headway, right? Let's pretend that's your situation. On your first couple of budgets, just budget what you do, right? Just plan out what you want to do with your money, what you're trying to do. So maybe let's say you make, I'm going to use simple numbers because my brain doesn't want to work that hard today, okay? So let's say you have $1,000 coming in a month. I hope you have more than that, but we're going to do that for simple numbers. You have $1,000 coming in a month and you normally spend $200 going out to eat. And you're like, man, all that money going out to eat, I don't really want to spend that much going out to eat. I'm not saying squash it, but maybe you're like, okay, I want to try to save like at least $50. So you say, okay, $150, I think I can make that work. So that means I might need to come up with 1 or 2 more meals instead of the whole thing, right? So trying to make small incremental change instead of throwing all the changes at the wall and then being frustrated when you can't keep up with them all.
Now, Christian, I want to ask you, I told you I was going to ask you some tough questions.
Sure.
So what happens now is it's Friday and my homeboys call me or your homegirls call you and they say, you know what, Christian, let's just say it's the end of the month and we're almost, we made our budget goal, we're close to it and we saved all of our money. And then we get that phone call and they want us to come out, come hang out, this weekend or go travel somewhere last minute. How do you take your budget that you have in mind? How do you tell your friends and family, no, I'm on a budget? How do you do that?
Personally, for me, it wasn't hard. Like I said, I am a naturally frugal person, right? I don't be spending money. You can say it was my grandmother. My grandmother grew up in the Depression. So she had a very, I'm going to use the word cheap because my grandma was cheap. She was not frugal. She was the kind of person, her husband used to split a can of Vienna sausages and a sun-kissed orange for lunch. Okay. He was a grown man. So when it comes to trying to deal with people who want you to do something that doesn't fit in your plan, it's really important to understand why you have a plan at all. I'm going to say that. There are a lot of times when we try to start planning, we just do it because other people say we should do it. If you have a reason why you're doing it. So for me, when I started, I was trying to get out of debt, right? And that was important to me. I wanted to get out of debt and I had a timeline. So for me, it wasn't a matter of, oh, what am I, like, oh, I really want to go out. It was like, for me, I really wanted to get out of debt more than anything else. So if you start there saying, what is the reason why I'm doing what I'm doing? I'm sorry, y'all. My husband is playing with the light and it's throwing me off. What is the reason I'm doing this for? Why am I going about? Why am I even bothering? Maybe you're trying to buy a house, right? And they're like, oh, come out to eat with us. And you have two options. If you're at the end of the month and you literally have no money, you can say, girl, I'm gonna have to catch you in the next month. Or you can say, where y'all going? Call me when y'all leave the restaurant. I'll meet y'all and we'll go hang out. Like, we got to get more creative when we're thinking about that. The answer doesn't have to be no. The answer can be, girl, I got a bottle of wine at the house. You want to come sit on my couch and sip? That's probably your best option because COVID right now.
Be creative in also, know your limits, understand what your mission or your vision is for your budget and what you're trying to do, and then hold firm to that, right?
Definitely hold firm to that. And remember, like, I'm gonna throw this one in there. Tell people what you're doing and why. You will quickly determine who your actual supporters are, like somebody who's encouraging you and trying to get you to do what you say you want to do, and somebody who is just like, forget what you want, come out and do what I want. And it's like, I just told you I was trying to do a thing. You're not a real friend. You're a selfish person who's masquerading as a friend, but that's okay. You can be selfish, just not with my money. So that's something that you can start to assess when you're trying to accomplish something. I'm sure most business owners have gone through this. You got late nights, you trying to do something, you trying to get something together, you're working on a big project, somebody wants you to go out, and you have to tell them no, because you got stuff to do. You're not trying to be up till 5 tomorrow morning, or you have to be up at 5 tomorrow morning, and they talking about going out at 10. And you're like, no, baby, I got to go to sleep at 8. It's the exact same thing. You're trying to prioritize what's important to you. And if it's important to you, it should be important to them as well. The last thing I'll say is to plan that stuff in advance. I have a young lady who recently started a business that I was on her podcast recently. And one of the things she talked about was just, I might have to schedule out a couple of weeks in advance when I want to spend time with friends, just because she's busy. And that can be true for your money as well. It's like, girl, let me get you on a list. We got $100. I want you in my $100. So let me pencil you in which day you want to come out when I got money still.
No, you're speaking to our community. Because our community, we budgeting is something that, for many of us, it wasn't necessarily taught or shared in our families. How can we begin the process of teaching this to our children? Let's just say we take your class at Do Better Financial in a couple of weeks, and we learn how to budget and we stick to budgeting. What is it that we need to, what conversations should we be having with our families, our extended families and friends in order to make budgeting a common language that we speak?
Yeah, so I guess I can use my family as an example. When I first started this, so like I said, my grandmother, my paternal grandmother, so my dad's mom, she was very frugal. She was the kind of person who, when she realized what interest was, now she did not learn about interest in school, right? We're talking about the 40s. She didn't learn about this stuff in school. They went to buy their first house and she went to go make the payment. And this is back in the day when you had to go to like a place to make a payment. And they like had a little book where they would write down what your new balance was. And so let's say she paid them $200, and when she got back her balance, it only showed that she had paid down like $130. And she was like, what happened to my other money? And they were like, oh, that was the interest payment. She was like, the what? That's not gonna work. And so after they paid off that house, the next house they bought, they paid cash. So that's my legacy, right? Because she was like, we're not having that. You're not just gonna take my money. But for the rest of my family, especially my mom's side, they grew up more poor. So it wasn't like cash flow planning was a thing. If you had money, that was probably all you had, and you just kind of went in order of importance. So the first thing was we had to keep the lights on, we had to make sure we had a place to live, we had to make sure everybody ate, and we scraped together what we could to make sure everybody still had clothes on. That was how she grew up. And so I think because we didn't have disposable income of any sort for a lot of generations to manage, right? It was, you have less than you need and you just make it work. And so now as we start moving into a situation where more people have disposable income, or more people don't realize the choices that they actually can make in order to make room in their plan, we have to start having different conversations. So I think when we're talking about like my family, one of the things I would say is they would ask me, hey, we're going to such and such, you want to go? And my phrase was, it's not in the budget this month, or I already spent my fund money. Catch me next week when I get paid again. That was what I did. When you're talking about like an intentional conversation, especially with like children, start early. Kids understand more than you know, and they catch more than they hear. So they're paying attention when you're on the phone and you're, faking voices to avoid the bill collector. They're paying attention when you go to the grocery store and you have to put stuff back, right? Give them something else to look at. Go to the grocery store with a list, know how much you have to spend and know how much stuff costs, put it in the basket, and then let them see how much things cost, right? So if it's like, oh, mommy, instead of trying to hide it, that's something that we really got to try to get out of, especially hiding it from our kids. It's like, they're your legacy. They need to know how to do this. Don't hide it from them. You can, if you want to, hide it from outsiders, but these kids need to know how this works. They're going to spend money one day. And if you don't show them how to or not to, they're going to learn it from who? Kim Kardashian and Kanye West. They ain't got that kind of money. That won't do them no good.
They got money to burn, right? Yeah,
exactly.
I'm looking here at the feed, and shout out to my co-host of Voices of the BBFG, the mental health segment that we do. Her name is Stephanie Lyons. And she offered up a suggestion, also about being creative and making sure that, if you can't do something that's major, at least offer up a small, type of a thing that you could do, with your friends. So she mentioned like coffee or dessert. So, it's always good to kind of have some of those canned responses that you talked about earlier. Hey, it's not in the budget, or hey, this is an unscheduled, activity for me. I'll have to catch you next time, because then that way you don't have to, think in the moment of, how to reject someone's, offer. I look at it this way: you're trying to break my budget. And maybe you don't understand what I'm saving for. Maybe you don't understand what I'm working for. But, and those conversations can be difficult, especially when it's friends and family.
Oh, sure. And I think that's the thing we have to remember. And I think sometimes people get frustrated with friends and family for asking. And it's like, they want to spend time with you. That's not bad. And it's your budget. Just like if you're married, it's your responsibility to keep your vows, not nobody else. So if it's your plan, it's your responsibility to execute it, not theirs. And if there's something that they want that is outside of the plan, you can, like she said, you can offer up an option. I actually really like that one, especially if you're already known for being late all the time. You can just be like, girl, I'm gonna catch you at dessert. That could work really well for you. You could play right into your normal plan, and they might not even know that the thing is different. It's like, oh girl, she always late.
Now, Christian, now I'm gonna ask another tough question, and I know that you're going to be offering classes to many of the folks in the BBFG later on. Talk to us about married couples and how oftentimes we come into the union, we're all in love, and baby girl, I love you, and sugar pudding, I love you, and this and that. But then you haven't really, experienced financial situations together. And so one person may be free with the checkbook and free with the credit card and free with the cash. And then the other is more reserved and conservative. And those two financial personalities don't always mesh well together. how do you keep the marriages together when budgeting can tear it apart?
Whew. So there's two answers to that question. First of all, I love to have either dating, like people who are dating and are like, we want to get our individual finances together so that we can move forward. People who are engaged. I love to catch you then, right? Because honestly, money is it's a reflection of some part of your character, right? So you may spend money in a fearful way, right? Which may indicate to your partner, hey, they've got some trauma, they've got some issues that they've dealt with in the past and they're trying to recover from those, or they're just terrified of being broke like their parents, and so they don't spend a dime and they never have any fun, right? You can start to learn some of those things about people through the way that they spend their money. You might also learn that they grew up broke and now they have no reason to assume that they'll have more. They don't think about tomorrow because they were trained to only make sure they could get through the day. So that's how they spend money.
Right.
So if you can assess that before you get married, you can at the very least set an expectation, right? And start having conversations. I don't know how I want to get into this exactly, but when my husband and I were first dating, he knew I was a financial coach. He slid in my DMs, y'all. Like literally slid in my DMs because I had been marketing my business and I kept popping up in his feed, right? That'll preach. Keep doing what God told you to do and you'll pop up where you're supposed to be so he can stumble his behind over you, but that's separate. Anyway, so for me, he knew my thing, right? My debt-free story is all over the internet. I'm constantly talking about managing money. So he knew what he was getting. I, on the other hand, I don't know anything about him, which is standard, right? People don't usually like, I like long walks on the beach. I have, I work in this particular industry and I have a 340 credit score. Like people don't say that, right? He didn't, I'm sorry, that he didn't have a 340, but I'm just saying, like, that's not how people introduce themselves, right? So when you're talking about trying to get into relationships, it's good to start to have that conversation early, not necessarily about specifics, but about behaviors and attitudes. Then once you're married, let's say you've gotten into it. And honestly, this is a lot of my clients. You've gotten into a relationship and you realize, like you said, so-and-so wants to spend all the time. The other person don't ever want to spend nothing. How do you reconcile that? The cash flow plan is your friend. It gives you permission to have the talks without it being accusatory, right? So we can start, okay, this is June. What are we doing for June? Actually, it's going to be July now. God dog, it's already July. So this is about to be July. What do we want to do? What do we want to, what are the plans that we want to accomplish? What are the things that we want to do together? And we can start to write them down and see where they fall, right? And as you're doing that together, you can have, I want to say, a contained disagreement, right? Because it's not about you don't never tell me what you want to do. Well, you always shopping, right? Instead of that is, babe, let's say we're going to set aside $200 for you to go shopping. Bet. That way I know how much I can use to go shopping. He knows how much he can use to go and, buy gadgets or lighting or whatever, right? We've had that discussion. So when it comes time for the bill to come through, I'm just going to be honest. I'm the miser, right? I'm the one who's doing all the tracking. Let's just be honest about that. I happen to enjoy the tracking. He happens to hate it. So it works out fine. But when you're talking about that, when I see the bill come in and I say, hey, babe, what was this for? He can say, oh, that's the thing we agreed on.
Right.
And it's done, right? It's over. It's not we didn't talk about this. And how could you just, we squashed all that because we talked about it beforehand. And if we need to change, right? That was the last thing I mentioned. Be ready to adjust, go with the flow. We sit down and we talk about it. We have a 20-second discussion. We pull out the budget. Mine happens to be on my phone. Like I said, I've been doing this for what, 10 years now? 10 years now. Yeah, actually, yeah. February 2010. So it's been 10 years now that I've been cash flow planning. So I have a little bit of practice, okay, just a little bit. But having that plan to go at and look at, hey, this is what we agreed to. Where are we going to make adjustments to do something that we didn't agree to when we started? It's not a deal breaker.
Right.
It's just a matter of where's it going to come from? Like, money is finite. Unless you have a job where you can work overtime, we got to bring it out of what we already have.
Right.
If you want to work overtime, that's option two.
Now, let me ask you this. Budgeting, cash flow planning. I got to get my terminology right. Cash flow planning, it's an ongoing thing, right? This is not something that you do just once and then you watch it and see if it works. This is something you put together and then you make it work. Is that correct? Am I saying that right?
You put the nail on the head, because here's what I'll tell you. Budgets don't work. Yes, you heard me right. You do. You do the work. You're the person acting on this, on these set of numbers, on this piece of paper. You are the one carrying out the action to make it happen. So without your interaction, without your intentional actions, right? So if you say we want to spend $400 or less on groceries this month, that might mean that we need to do some meal prepping or some meal planning. That might mean that we need to look in the freezer or in the pantry. If you're like me, you probably got 95 bags of beans just chilling in the top of the pantry that take too much time to cook that you ain't bothered with. But if you get to the end of the month and you got $2 left in your budget for food, it's like, guess it's time for beans, right? So that's when you can't do this once and expect it to continue to function. Right. Every single month is different. I low-key want to pull up our cash flow plan just so I can tell you some of the changes that occur periodically. But just for example's sake, I'll walk you through the last couple of months. So in March, our cash flow plan looked very similar to the way that it had in the past, right? We were doing what we normally did because my husband had a full-time job. I had a full-time job, and we were just going about business. I actually also had a part-time job. I was a what is the word for that? I was a fitness trainer at the YMCA. So I taught a dance class. Now I literally got to teach 2 classes before they shut down the gym for COVID, but that's separate. I was going through the process of getting certified, so I was getting paid for that. So our money was just fine. We had money to go out to eat pretty much whenever we wanted. That didn't mean we did, because I was trying to be a fitness trainer so that I couldn't gain 1,000,000 pounds if it's a couple. Right. So we're going through it, and here comes April. As of April, my husband is no longer gainfully employed. He's furloughed, which means you still work for us, we just don't pay you. And I'm like, what's the point? But okay. Right. So in April, our cash flow plan went to half. We had to scrap it. And so stuff that was not a big deal, we needed to try and get rid of until unemployment kicked in. So Netflix, Hulu, Apple this, Google that, like, pick it. It had to go. There were some other things that got to go just because he wasn't going to work anymore. My husband worked like 50 minutes from our house, so he was always on the Beltway, and he was spending $200 or $300 a month on gas. All of that stuff went down because he didn't have to go anymore, right? Then you fast forward to May, we get unemployment. Our budget goes back to normal-ish, right? And so you get a shift there. Now we're getting into July, where they're talking about is that normal-ish is going to go away because they're going to cut his unemployment in half. If you didn't know, FUA, the Federal Unemployment Assistance, that extra $600 a week you've been getting, it goes away on July 31st unless they change their minds soon. The Senate is sitting on their hands, so I don't know when that's happening, but I'm not holding my breath. In July, we're going to be preparing to lose half of our income again, right? Or a quarter of it. So every single month, not just in a pandemic, one month you need to, buy shoes for the kids. The next month they go into, I'm going to pretend like it's not 2020. Let's pretend it's 2019 for a minute. They're going to vacation. They're going to camp. You need to go to somebody's wedding. Every month's gonna look a little bit different. Will there be things that are the same? Of course, right? The rent due, the lights due. That stuff is the regular. And so you don't necessarily have to fool with it. I like to put all that stuff in one box, so I pretty much don't have to look at it. And all of the stuff that's adjustable, I put in another box. That's just the way I like to do my budget. But those changes allow you to make different decisions each month. So last month we found out that my aunt had been diagnosed with stage 4 bone cancer, and I was planning to go next week. I got a call saying that they were putting on our hospice about 2.5 weeks ago, and there was nothing they could do. At that point, I moved my trip up. I was like, I need to go see my aunt. How do we do that? By the grace of God, partially, but we put it in the budget. And then at the last minute, we had an amazing friend who chipped in so that we could take my husband with us. So we were planning to just take it out of our emergency fund, because for us that was an emergency. I wanted him to meet her. He'd never met her. She's been sick for a long time. And so we went. And now right before this, I got notification that she might make it another week or so. And so we may be going back, and July's budget is going to accommodate that. And so every month looks different. And like I said, when I said earlier, stuff happens and you adjust, I meant that literally. You don't know that somebody's gonna get sick. You don't know that you're gonna need to travel, fly in the middle of a pandemic. Some people were like, oh, I'm jealous. And I was like, don't be jealous. Wearing a mask when you're sitting on a plane is not fun. But you just gotta adjust with it. You can't. I used to be like this. I used to be like glued to my plan, and we're not deviating from the plan, and the plan is written in stone and it's done. I did it on May 31st, so June must finish the way I started it. That ain't real life, especially not if you got kids. I know that for a fact. They come home on Thursday with a project that's got to be done on Friday, and it's gonna cost you $200 in supplies. Like, exactly. I wasn't this kid. You're welcome, mother, but I do know these people.
Right. Yeah, I'm glad you said that. What we're seeing now is that budgets, cash flow plans, they're not meant to be restrictive.
No.
They're meant to facilitate your life, right? So as life happens, I'm able to allocate funds and resources to an event or to a purchase. But if I don't have that plan in place, then, if I do need to do something and I can't because I don't have the money, it's likely due to the fact that I didn't budget, I didn't cash flow plan. And I want to touch on something Stephanie dropped in the feed earlier, and I'm going to go back and read it. She said, first of all, she said, girl, you preaching to me, so you must be preaching a sermon to her. But then she said, we have to stop shaming each other in the Black community for budgeting, for having a budget. How do we switch off the make it rain mentality and turn on the make it flow mentality?
Oh, I like that. That was nice. I'm stealing it. This is a sweeping generalization. I'm going to say it one more time, just so it's the disclaimer. Sweeping generalization. There is a tendency that we have to think that the only way you can prove that you have something is by wearing it or showing it or throwing it. If we look in other communities, people who are of large amounts of built over time wealth, right? Not your instant millionaires, not the Kardashians, okay? Think Warren Buffett, right? They're regular. They've been regular and they stay regular. And only once they have gotten to a crazy amount of wealth, do they start to spend some on things that are more flashy. I think what we have to do.
Buffett, he doesn't have a Gucci belt. Warren Buffett doesn't.
I don't even know what Gucci is.
So does he get the new J's every year they come out? Do you know? Or
I would be surprised if he owned a pair of jeans, let alone J's. Personally.
Oh, okay. Is he putting the new rims on his Cadillac Seville every? I'm just asking questions for.
I'm pretty sure he drives a 20-year-old Honda, if I'm not mistaken. Last I checked. Cadillac. My bad. You were right. You said the exact car. My husband knows. It's a Cadillac Sedan DeVille. He's had the same car for like 20 years.
20 years. Okay.
Um,
I'm just asking.
So here's the reality that we need to be aware of, right? It's not about how much you make, it's about how much you keep. And so even if you are making $1 million, if you keep 100, you are 100-aire. So we have to get to the point where we are comfortable enough in ourselves that we don't need to show other people what we have. I'm not saying you can't like nice things. It's fine to like nice things. It's fine to buy nice things. I don't want you to buy nice things and not have what you need. I have definitely heard of people who are renting things like a refrigerator from a place like Aaron's, but they went and bought insert expensive random thing here. I get wanting to treat yourself, but let's get our priorities in order. What is it we're trying to do? Are we trying to impress people we don't even know and half of them we don't even like? Or are we trying to live the best life we can for the people around us? And that's a personal decision. Right. Shaming one another for spending extra money doesn't get us anywhere. Right. And shaming people who don't doesn't get us anywhere. I'm not trying to shame anybody. I want people to intentionally decide that I don't want to have anything to show for my life other than a row of shoes. If right. you make that decision on purpose, like this is my legacy, and your legacy is a row of really expensive shoes, at least you made that decision on purpose. If you just happen to not have any money because you always buy shoes, but you really want to buy a house and you really want to invest in real estate, then you're not living your best life. You're not pleased and nobody is getting improved.
So I'm gonna ask you, this is a simple question. This is something that I had to come to grips with many years ago. And this question is basically this: can I transform my life through cash flow planning? Am I locked into my current financial situation because of my current circumstances? And I'm assuming the answer is no. Can I change where I am today and be somewhere completely different tomorrow through budgeting?
Here's what I'll say. There is a power in knowing where your money is going and has to go. Kind of like I mentioned before, there are a lot of people who, and there's a family that, I'm saying this not from personal experience, but from experience meeting with other people. There are people who are very focused on today and tomorrow, and that's about as far into the future as they get. When you take life in larger chunks, a month. Now, for cash flow planning, I don't suggest doing more than a month and expecting it to not change, right? You can work through like what you expect the year to look like if you got super stable money, but that's not what we're talking about here. Once you get a hold of what is this month going to look like and what do I need to do, it's one thing that you have to worry about less throughout the month, which frees up brain space for you to figure out how you can make moves so this doesn't look like this next month. So for example, if I know the bills are going to get paid and I got this much money to do X, Y, and Z with, that means I can now start thinking about that business venture that's kind of been floating around in my head every time I take a shower, but I don't have time to focus. I can now start thinking about how, like, what do I even want to do, right? There are a lot of people who make decent amounts of money, but they spend it all because they're trying to fill a hole because they hate what they do. Not like they're bored. I've been there, but like they hate it. I've been there too. When you hate what you do, I've noticed there's a tendency to spend more money to kind of soothe the ache. Right. But if you get the money in order and go, okay, I got this much to spend, how can I leave this place? Right. Now I can dedicate more hours in the week to looking for jobs or trying to create jobs or investing in, you can also make space to invest in your business, which is something that I had to do when I was, I can't do the math, I guess 29. I decided that I wanted to start this business. And in the process of doing so, I realized that there needed to be a financial investment. Then I was living with my parents and I made the decision to stay there longer so that I could use more of my resources to fund getting the business off the ground. So
Right.
when you sit down and you look at numbers, I was like, man, if I move to an apartment right now, I'm gonna have like $100 a month to invest in my business. Now, granted, that shifted by the time I did start my business because praise God, I got a raise, got a couple of them. But when you take the opportunity to look at those numbers and figure out what it is that you need right now, you have the time and the creative space in your brain to start working on what it is you want to do in the future so that you can move from point A to point B. You can also take advantage of new opportunities. Even if you only got $20, it might give you an opportunity to buy a new book, invest in a small program or something like that to improve yourself on purpose, rather than seeing it come up in the middle of the month, not knowing where your money's going, not knowing if you have $20 to spend on it, and then not spending it, or spending it, regretting it because now you can't pay your light bill because you didn't know where your money was going. So that's what I like to think of it as. It's the tool that allows you to think about your money a little less so you can think about other stuff more.
Right. Now, we only have 10 minutes left. And before we get to Do Better Financial and the courses that you're going to be offering, there's a couple more questions I want to try to squeeze in.
Okay.
And I know you're going to knock them out of the park. One of the things that I was thinking about is for our community, Black American community, unemployment is consistently twice as high in our community.
Yeah.
The wealth gap is wide and ever widening in our community. And then home ownership is well below that of our peers. I know that budgeting is important. What do we need to hear? What does our community need to see in order for us to collectively understand the importance of cash flow planning and budgeting? Because the numbers aren't sending the message.
I think there's two things we have. There's a tendency for people who don't make a lot to assume that making a plan won't help them because they're like, I don't have enough to meet my obligations. How is a plan going to help me? I've heard that before. Knowing what the gap is important, right? Because you could be under the impression that you're $2,000 short when it's actually like 200. And seeing that on paper might make you go, oh, okay, we can find $200, right? Or you could be $2,000 short, and we need to start thinking about things from less of a prideful situation where I got to do everything on my own by myself all the time, and start thinking more collectively. How can we move forward together? How can we be good neighbors? How can we help one another out? How can we move forward? I know everybody in here is not Christians, but I like to think of the church in Acts. They had a group of people together who were so committed to the same cause that they shared everything and nobody lacked anything. Mm-hmm. And that concept of sharing, of being together and making intentional decisions on behalf of not just me, but the people in my community is important. So if you're talking about, and I've given this example before, and again, I'm not faulting people who haven't done this. It's something that I have the bandwidth to think about because I'm not worried about how to feed my kids. But mm-hmm. It's something that I've thought about before. How cool would it be if there was a place that, a bunch of single moms could get together and like once a week or once a month, each person would do, we'd have a group of people meal prepping and everybody could go home with 5 or 6 bags of food. And that's one less thing you got to think about this week, right? How cool would it be if we got together and bought a side of a cow and everybody took a piece home, right? That kind of thinking, again, you got to remove some of the emergency from your everyday in order to get there. But when it comes to that sort of thing, we can't do this individually, right? That whole pull yourself up by your own bootstraps thing is BS. Like, it's not going to work. This thing is going to require some community involvement. That's the only way that we're going to even approach catching up. I don't think that's a term we can even really use. If we're just going to grow, if we're going to move in the right direction, it's going to take us coming together, getting creative, and realizing that we can't do it solo. This is not a solo activity, regardless of what people seem to think. None of this is a solo activity.
Right. Now, one more question I have is accountability. when it comes to budgeting, when it comes to cash flow planning, I know in major corporations, there's all these eyes and ears and people dedicated to make sure that cash flow plans and budgets, are, well assembled, they're complete, they're accurate, they include everything. And, for me, for my wife, or for someone who's single, it's just them. Talk to me about accountability. How do people who, they get 2 or 3 months down the road, they've gone to your class, they've started cash flow planning. How do they hold themselves accountable, or should they get an accountability partner?
So I definitely encourage accountability partners for people who get tired, right? One of the reasons I started teaching Financial Peace University is because I was in the process of saving up my emergency fund and I was bored. So I started teaching so that I would have constant reminders of what it was I was doing. So definitely surrounding yourself with like-minded people, whether that's joining a group on a Facebook platform of some sort or taking some sort of class. That's always a really good way to do that. The other thing that you can do is have like just, a couple of partners. So maybe it's you and a friend group, like, hey, let's try to do this thing together. We're going to hold each other accountable. That works really well in like workout scenarios, people who meet up for a specific, like, hey, Tuesday at 5, be here. We're going to get it in for 30 minutes, right? They have a set schedule and they're all committed to doing that thing regularly because the other people are expecting them to be there, right? And then obviously, last but not least, is you can pay somebody to do it. That's what a lot of people pay me for, right? To ask them, hey, how's your budget going? Or how's planning going? What's changed? What's different? Do we need to update? Do we need to change? What's working? What's not working? So that's what I do, right? People like myself, financial coaches, and like people ask, like, what's the difference? As a financial coach, my primary focus is making sure that you have the money to do the other things you want to do with your money. So I am not somebody who does investing specifically. I send you to someone for that because that's important. But in order to invest, you need some money. And if you broke, and if you don't know where your money's going, you can't invest nothing, because then you just gonna end up putting everything on a credit card and they almost cancel each other out, right? So those are the 3 things I would suggest, is either getting like just a friend, a family member, a small group, maybe something that's virtual like a Facebook group, and professional, right? Paying somebody to do it.
Right. Christian, you've given us a ton of great information. And I know someone like myself, I'm not a financial genius. I'm not a financial wizard. I'm none of those things. And I know that there are people out there that feel the same way. We're not financial experts. Does budgeting, does cash flow planning, does it require you to be a financial expert?
No, this is not rocket science. You need simple math. All this is about is looking at how much I got coming in, what are my responsibilities going out, and is there anything left over, and assigning that to whatever it is that your priorities are. So if you're trying to invest in a business, trying to buy a house, trying to get out of debt, trying to save money for, I don't know, a trip that you might take in 2021, whatever it is, you're just doing simple math, right? You want to have a visual of where your money is going. And what I like to tell people, honestly, is once you learn the basic skills, you can teach it to anybody. You don't need a PhD. You don't need anything special. You just need a basic level of understanding, a piece of paper, a pencil, and a simple calculator. You don't even need a computer or a TI-83 or the $1,000 computers we carry in our pockets. You can have one of those little sad gray computers you used to get for the TOS test. What they call it now? They call it Star test. I don't know what they call it now, but they get these little sad calculators. It's about this big. Y'all know what I'm talking about. They might be blue and they had a little strip at the top for the photons, the light sensitivity. Anyway, you don't need anything more complicated than that to do this. And I promise you, if you stick with it, it takes, let me be honest, to work out the kinks and to actually get a plan that starts feeling like you don't need to change it all the time, takes about 3 months. You need 3 full cycles, 90 days of going through this, putting your plan into practice, right? And if you realize the plan isn't something you can put into practice, making adjustments so that you can, right? If you realize that you made a wish list instead of a plan, and you know that $100 eating out budget is not working for you because it's more like 400, okay, what do we need to do, right? What do we need to shift? So I think that's important for people to remember. I'm not asking you, like I said, to be like me and Phil and learn how to do pivot tables and VLOOKUPs and all of that. You don't need any of that. You need none of it. You need simple math and a desire to do better.
And a desire to do better. All of this stuff is so powerful, and I think that we need to hear it more often. I know that Do Better Financial has a couple of courses coming up. You have an announcement, I guess you kind of want to leak here right now. Then we're going to put in the comments a little bit of information about where folks can reach you later on.
Sure. So as Phil has hinted at, I'm actually launching a course on the 8th of July. So that's a couple weeks out. It's called 10 Days to a Raise. So for all of those of you who could use a raise, but your boss is not in the giving in the giving mood, you can give yourself one, right? And so we're going to go through the process of not only how you can give yourself that raise, but also preparing your wallet for home buying. That's something that I also wanted to focus on. I know a lot of people in the age range that I'm in those 30s, those late 20s, early 30s, are, you know, they would like a piece of that American dream, but don't really see a way to make it happen. And I also see people who have cut their slice of the American dream and it starts tasting a lot like that pie from the help. So I want to make sure that they are aware of what's included in the process. And we're also hoping to have a special guest come in for that portion. We have a realtor that we're trying to partner with to get us some more information on that side so that you can have not only the financial part of preparing for buying a house, but what to look for, how to shop, how to make your lists, how to choose your neighborhoods, that kind of thing. So that's what we're hoping to include. Shout out to Miss Berna. She's supposed to be working on that for us. And yeah, it's going to be pretty amazing. So the early bird special, I will be launching very soon. I will be sure to put it here in the group. But I think it will be an amazing opportunity. It's only 10 days, like I said, to get you the information that you need. You'll have full access to it for a while. There's also going to be access to a Facebook group, so you can get some of that accountability I was talking about. And everyone here, for those of you who are interested in some one-on-one coaching, you can start off with just a free consultation. Just go to dobetterfinancial.com/free, and you can sign up there. There's a calendar. You can pull you a slot, and we'll get together and we'll start figuring out what your plan should look like.
Christian Barnes with Do Better Financial, the BBFG thanks you, To the Table thanks you, and I really do appreciate your time and your energy on today. This was amazing. We'll play this back over and over again in the group, and I do hope that you will come back. This, to me, was a 101 class. We're going to need some more time with you, Christian.
Okay, sure thing.
Have a great and blessed weekend, and just hold on a second. We're going to end the Facebook feed, and then you and I are going to wrap up. Everybody say goodbye to Christian.